Now then, urbanization is a bit of a theme tonight, not just on Global Business, even in Africa Live. But let's focus on one specific issue. At the moment, Africa is the least urbanized continent on the planet. But lately, we've seen countries across Africa being home to some of the fastest rates of urbanization worldwide. African urban areas are growing at 3.5% a year. That figure is expected to at the very least hold or accelerate through to 2050. Now that's in stark contrast to other parts of the world where urbanization, for example, is barely 2% in Asia, 0.3% in Europe, 1.23% in Latin America and the Caribbean, and just about 1% in North America. Moreover, the share of the African population that lives in urban areas was about 28% in 1990. That's projected to hit 52% by 2025. And that poses a major challenge for African governments, with countries like Kenya seeing a larger and larger chunk of the urban population living in slums. Now, if the bulk of your population in urban areas is concentrated in slums, it helps to understand exactly what sort of challenges they face, not just from an infrastructure perspective, but from a social and an economic one as well. To help us understand that in a little more detail, let's now talk to Dr. Mberu. He's the head of the Urbanization and Wellbeing Program at the African Population Health and Research Center and is with me in studio. Thank you for your time this evening, sir.
Thank you for having me.
This survey that you have, fascinating study, it indicates that the proportion of slum dwellers who are concerned about unemployment between the year 2000 and 2012 essentially halved. Why is that?
Well, that's indicator that halved is actually concerns. Okay, people were asked to identify what are their key challenges. Okay, it doesn't actually mean that unemployment has halved.
Indeed, because I mean in that interval,
in fact,
unemployment has gone up.
It has gone up. What has happened is that there are new challenges, okay? And two key new challenges that was not there, in fact, it was not identified in 2000, but now in 2012, is the issue of garbage and sewer disposal, and most importantly, insecurity. So, and you know that when new challenges come on board, it blurs the old challenges. So it appears, and that's what that report shows, that the challenge of insecurity, which has actually become very significant in the slums, particularly of Nairobi, okay, has seemed to have taken prominence relative to unemployment. But in reality, unemployment has actually increased.
But that's an interesting paradox, isn't it? Because you've got unemployment rising across the board. I mean, in case of women, for example, I see women unemployment in this particular survey that you referred to was up to about 50.7%.
It is 50.7%.
By the end of 2012, and yet unemployment is not a concern. How do we reconcile those two elements?
Well, like I said, the issue of concern has a lot to do with what are on the plate. And like I said, when you have new concerns that are more threatening, for example, insecurity, there's a lot of people losing their lives, there's a lot of issues around mugging, issues around shooting. Issues around
gangs.
Yeah, so those things has a way of, you know, blurring or blunting the other challenges. So, and remember, these are questions people were asked to speak out of their mind. Okay, but when we really measured unemployment, it was really high. Okay, and like you mentioned, for women, unemployment was actually over 51% of them were not employed, and for men, over 16% were not employed, not working at all. And when you even talk about employment, it's also important to underscore the kind of employment that exists there.
Because this is just basically vulnerable.
Yeah, there are unemployment on the fringes that doesn't have security. For example, if you look at the data, only 14% of women who are employed are in formal employment. Okay, and for men, it's actually just 18%. So the rest are informal workers. People who live on the fringe, anything happens, they lose their job, whether they are gardeners, whether they are...
instant inflation goes up, incomes drop, that's it. So you're down into the poverty
you are
bracket.
Out. So basically, unemployment is a key challenge in this place.
Let's focus on something else that was also in the publication, and this really stood out for me. Women in the 20 to 24 age group have a low labor force participation rate in Kenya. And I'm quoting a line from the report here. As a result of the changes in their marital status. Now, with regard to women in the slum areas, what effect does marital status have on their ability to participate in the labor market?
That's a very good question, and quite an interesting finding as well. from the data, 42% of the women who live in the slums of Nairobi are married by age 24. Okay? For men, it's actually only 14%. Okay? So what does that do? When you get early marriage, actually blocks progression in school. So when young women marry early, their ability to acquire skills that will help them secure employment is actually jeopardized.
Yeah.
Okay, so that is one. Of course, marriage is the gateway to pregnancy and to childbearing. So early marriage leads to early childbearing.
And the burden of child rearing falls disproportionately on
women.
the
women, okay? So the time required for childcare and the fact that immediately you have a young kid, you are not able to take opportunities that, I mean, the jobs are not really there, but when they are there, they are not mostly outside the home.
Yeah.
So and immediately you have a child, it becomes difficult for you to go for such opportunities. Moreover, in the slums, in the context of poverty, it's a luxury to be able to hire childcare, somebody to take care of your child for you to be able to go for such jobs. So those are the factors that come together which marriage brings that hinders participation of younger women in the labor force.
One last question to you, Doctor. Some fairly interesting demographic shifts within the data that you put out in the survey as well. The proportion of men between the ages of 15 and 49 decreasing in 2012 compared to the year 2000. What's going on? Why are men living less, for lack of a better word?
Well, again, an interesting finding. What has happened is that in the last 50 years after independence, migration has shifted. Before independence, in many African countries, it was mostly men that moved. But after independence, female migration has actually increased. So that over time, we have seen significant shift in the structure, the gender structure of urban populations, with a lot of young women also joining the migration stream. That's actually the key for explaining what is happening. However, it is important to underscore, I mean, in Kenya, this data didn't cover the real effect of devolution. But we see that devolution is something we were going to look for out in the future that has potential to shift population to the counties beyond Nairobi. What that does is that devolution creates centers of counter-attraction. And of course, migration follows resources. So we are looking forward to devolution moving
and see if it will actually have a reverse migration.
And most of the time, men move first. So those are some of the factors we are hoping in the future will be able to drive the structure of the urban population.
Indeed, fascinating data, Dr. Mberu, but we'll have to be there for the time being. That has been Dr. Blessing Mberu. He's with the African Population and Health Research Center in studio with me today. We'll put a link to this study. It's a fascinating one. If you have time for it, just actually do get out there and read it if you can.